ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, the Honorable Senator Risa Ontiveros, participants, change makers, and innovators from across the renewable energy space, good morning, magandang umaga po. On this morning of January 26th, the inaugural International Day of Clean Energy, we welcome you to the official launch of the Responsible Energy Initiative in the Philippines. I am Marvin Lagonera, Energy Transition Strategist from Forum for the Future, and it's truly an honor to be your host today. Your presence today signifies our shared values and commitment in shaping an ecologically safe and socially just renewable energy transition. This room is filled with an extremely diverse set of organizations. We have RE developers, investors and banks, manufacturers, procurers, development partners, civil society, academic institutions, government agencies, media organizations, and other actors across the renewable energy space. O diba? Gano'ng kadalas mangyari ang ganitong pagtitipon-tipon? Palakpakan naman natin ang ating mga sarili. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. So this event marks the official launch of the Responsible Energy Initiative in the Philippines. The REI Philippines is an Asia-based initiative that supports renewable energy actors in pushing for the highest standards of social justice and ecological integrity. At REI, we want to push the conversation further. We would like to invite you to take on a critical lens to the renewable energy transition and its social and environmental implications. Because we want to not only have a fast transition, we also want a fair, just, and inclusive renewable energy transition. So to formally open the program, please join me in welcoming Maurice, Executive Director of the Center for Empowerment, Innovation, and Training on Renewable Energy, who will kick off today's event with her welcome remarks and to also introduce our keynote speaker. Over to you, Maurice.
Magandang umaga po ulit. Honorable Senator Risa Ontiveros, esteemed guests and fellow advocates for sustainable renewable energy, my greetings of peace and solidarity to everyone. Today's launch of the Responsible Energy Initiative in the Philippines coincides with the International Day of Clean Energy, which aims to raise awareness and mobilize action for a just and inclusive transition to clean energy for the benefit of people and the planet. Clean energy, particularly renewable energy, has an important role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and in realizing reliable energy for all. Thus, accelerating the shift to renewable energy is a key climate and development goal across the world. In the Philippines, our government targets to expand RE share in the power generation mix to 35% by 2030 and 50% by 2040. Aside from reducing air pollution and expanding access to affordable and clean energy, scaling renewable energy can create jobs and livelihoods and many more. For these reasons, UN Secretary General refers to the RE transformation as having the potential to be the peace project of the 21st century. Yet, the rapid scaling of RE in many parts of the world, including in the Philippines, is placing increasing pressure on natural resources, and social concerns are beginning to surface across the value chain. Scaling without due consideration to environmental and social outcomes may slow down the transition if the fallout ends up eroding the social license to operate. The longer we wait to address these challenges head-on, the more likely practices driving adverse impacts could become entrenched into the RE sector, making it harder and costlier to achieve an ecologically safe and socially just outcomes. This would not only be an unacceptable result from a climate perspective, but also from an energy security and access perspective. This brings me to the very essence of the Case for Action report that the Responsible Energy Initiative, or REI, in the Philippines is launching today, which is that a heightened focus on environmental and social impacts within the industry is pivotal if we are to lay the foundations for a rapid yet just transition. The REI Philippines is led by a consortium of 6 partners: the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities, Friedrich Ebert Stiftung Philippines, Oxfam Pilipinas, Business and Human Rights Resource Center, Forum for the Future, and my organization, the Center for Empowerment, Innovation, and Training on Renewable Energy. With the Philippines' RE transition at a critical juncture, showing promise with forward-looking policy, a mature developer sector, and dynamic civil society, among other promising characteristics, and impacts are expected to amplify as RE scales, we must seize on this critical window of opportunity to work together. Let us collaboratively set a new direction and establish the enabling conditions to harness the sector's full potential in driving a truly just transition, one that enhances environmental and social resilience and that leaves no one behind. With this, we in REI Philippines would like to enjoin everyone here to work together in pioneering a shift towards business models that go beyond doing less harm, enable social justice and economic resilience, and regenerate ecosystems. A way of working that addresses the new challenges that are emerging on the pathway to reaching the ultimate goal of a just transition. We are calling, therefore, on organizations across the sectors to take part in the action inquiry or model building. The processes for this will be shared by our next speakers. With this, again, we welcome everyone to this launch of REI. And at this point, I am pleased to introduce our keynote speaker, the Honorable Senator Risa Ontiveros, Chair of the Committee on Women, Family Relations, and Gender Equality. She's also a member of the Joint Congressional Energy Commission. She is known for her tireless work in promoting peace and social justice, public health, women's rights, and the welfare of the Filipino people. Even before becoming a legislator in 2005, she was one of the 27 Filipinas who earned a nomination to the prestigious Nobel Peace Prize for her work in the peace movement. Some of the landmark laws she championed as a legislator include the expanded maternity law, the mental health, reproductive health, universal health care, and expanded anti-hospital deposit laws. So these are just some of the very critical laws that she was able to advance and champion. Not known to many, however, she has been an advocate of clean and sustainable energy since her youth, actually since high school, when she joined the campaign against Bataan nuclear power plant. Today, she pushes for the installation of solar-powered systems in the social housing sector, barangay-covered courts, and other public-owned buildings. Senator Risa believes that RE is necessary to bring down the cost of power. Thus, as a member of the Joint Congressional Energy Commission, she has begun to look at EPIRA's liberal provisions on cross-ownership, on competitive selection process, and on barriers to connecting consumers to their choice renewable energy supplier. She also supports the rapid expansion of the grid's capability to balance supply and demand, not just to prevent blackouts like what happened in Panay, but also to ensure that the grid will be able to dispatch low-cost renewable energy. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Senator Risa Ontiveros.
To our colleagues from the Climate Change Commission, the Department of the Environment and Natural Resources, and the Department of Science and Technology, our partners from the Royal Norwegian Embassy, the Danish Embassy, the European Chamber of Commerce, the United Nations Office for Project Services, and the United Kingdom Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. Ms. Sumi Danarajan, Managing Director of Southeast Asia Forum for the Future, Mr. Erel Narida, President of One Renewable Energy Enterprise, Ms. Marla Garin Alvarez, Vice President and Head of the Sustainability Office of BDO Unibank, Ms. Anne Margaret Francisco, Country Manager of the Global Wind Energy Council, Ms. Erica Geronimo, Executive Director at Oxfam, Pilipinas, my dear old friend from a few decades or several decades ago, Marie Madamba Nunez, and all our other friends present here. Also my old dear college mate, Ms. Joey Magbuhat. All our friends from the private sector, civil society, the academe, and media. Isang magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. At salamat for inviting me. It's inspiring to hear about this official launch of the Responsible Energy Initiative, or REI Philippines. This is a crucial step in setting a positive tone for the future of the country's renewable energy sector. I would like to applaud the commitment of the REI consortium members. I commend the Forum for the Future, the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities, Oxfam Pilipinas, the Center for Empowerment, Innovation, and Training on Renewable Energy, the Business, Human Rights, and Resource Center, and Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, our dear old partner of my party, Akbayan. I hope to see this initiative move forward and advance clean, sustainable, and renewable energy. I share everyone's enthusiasm in helping initiate conversations and implement calls for action towards the betterment of people, communities, and the planet. At a time when we face almost incontestable threats to our survival, with the worsening impacts of the climate crisis, of which we find ourselves at the forefront, it is of utmost importance for us to hold space for finding solutions together. For years, our nation has grappled with challenges in energy security, reliability, and affordability. We heavily rely on baseload power generation for our energy sector or our energy supply, which is harmful to our environment, prone to resource depletion, and vulnerable to power supply disruptions. Earlier this month, our fellow Filipinos, may kasimanwa, on Panay and Guimaras Islands, as Maris also reminded us, experienced 4 days, some of them say, of large-scale blackouts after the tripping of 3 of their major coal-fired power plants. Tourism was affected. Small businesses suffered economic losses in the billions of pesos. Households experienced discomfort. Power outages seem to have become the norm in every Filipino household. I remember even in the 1990s, fanning my then newborn son every night of the blackout when the rechargeable electric fans that became in vogue then would discharge. Yearly, until now, we are subjected to frequent blackouts that, just like what happened on Panay and Guimaras, significantly disrupt our everyday activities. Also, heads of families, those engaged in remote or online work that relies heavily on electricity, along with small-scale entrepreneurs, both incur substantial economic losses. In the Senate, I have consistently engaged in committee hearings which could potentially lead us to answers and solutions to this same old perennial problem. Together with energy stakeholders, we have tirelessly highlighted the security concerns surrounding our country's power grid, particularly given that the State Grid Corporation of China holds a significant 40% stake in the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines. Since 2019, we have been advocating for a comprehensive security audit of our national power grid. I eagerly anticipate the release of the report by the Energy Regulatory Commission at the soonest possible time. In the past years, when oil prices continued to increase, consumers also suffered as we made use of imported oil for a sizable part of our energy needs. Hence, we are susceptible to changes and disruptions in the global market prices of petroleum products. This underscores the fact that relying on fossil fuel as an energy source is not only unsustainable, but also anti-consumer. Unfortunately, amidst these persisting challenges, it is the Filipino households that consistently bear the impact and suffer from unstable power supply and expensive electricity costs. On this International Day of Clean Energy, let's highlight the need to find solutions to this deeply ingrained problem and set forth an equitable energy agenda that will benefit our future generations. We need to slowly cure our dependence on fossil fuels as energy source and start investing in projects that are sustainable and environment friendly. The Philippines is actively pursuing a cleaner energy path by incorporating renewable sources, implementing supportive policies, and making commitments locally and internationally. Our involvement in events like COP28 and our goals in the Philippine Energy Plan reflect our commitment to expedite the transition to renewable energy. While that transition to renewable energy may appear to be a solution to the country's energy crisis, it is not, as Maris also said, without negative impacts. In Congress, bills have been filed to address unintended social and environmental impacts and consequences, such as increased minerals demand, leading to climate risks and human rights abuses. Issues persist in obtaining permits for RE sites in indigenous peoples' ancestral domains, raising concerns about free, prior, and informed consent and environmental safeguards. Our existing safeguards have loopholes. Impact assessments are prone to shortcuts, and gender sensitivity in climate change efforts is insufficient. Collaboration and reaching out to every stakeholder are essential to addressing these gaps for an ecologically safe and socially just energy transition. The message is clear. Let's transition not only to renewable energy, but also toward responsible energy. Marami pong salamat sa inyong lahat at mabuhay po tayo.
Thank you, Honorable Senator Risa, for sharing the important message about the urgency of the climate crisis and the importance of doing the renewable energy transition justly and responsibly. We are truly inspired by your leadership in advancing energy security and shaping a just renewable energy transition that promotes public health, the rights of women and other marginalized groups, the environment, and the welfare of the Filipino family. May I request the Honorable Senator to please come back to the stage for a group photo with our panelists. May I request our panelists to please join Senator Risa on stage, as well as our moderator for a group photo. Our team will be handing over our report that we will be launching today. May I request our dearest panelists and speakers to hold on to the report for the group photo. Thank you. At this juncture, we are pleased to share with you the findings from the Responsible Energy Initiative Philippines Case for Action Report, researched over 2023 by the REI Consortium. The report will provide a broad understanding of the ecological and social impacts being generated by utility-scale RE in the Philippines. To walk us through findings, I would like to invite Cynthia from Forum for the Future and Pochoy from the Business and Human Rights Center. Over to you, Cynthia and Pochoy.
Good morning, everyone in the room. We're pleased to have you here. Thank you for joining us in this launch of the Responsible Energy Initiative Philippines. I'm Pochoy Labog from the Business and Human Rights Resource Center. So it's a pleasure to be sharing the findings of our report for you today. We began this journey nearly 1 year ago upon noticing that while increasing attention was being paid to the acceleration of RE, there is a considerable lack of information available on the emerging impacts of utility-scale RE production and deployment in the Philippines. In producing this report, we focused on first establishing what patterns are emerging and then assessing the extent to which related impacts are being managed. Due to time constraints, we are only able to share high-level impacts with you this morning. However, the full-length report will provide you with a range of detailed impacts across different stages of the value chain. So, as you can see from the slide, I'm so sorry we have to blow up the screen, but let me just narrate to you the impacts, the span of impacts of renewable energy technology. And it's quite a range. The first is, of course, raw materials extraction and the extraction of critical materials. As you can see from, I don't know if you can see it, but that's the first stage. With the growing demand for renewable energy, there's also a growing demand for the raw materials that comprise the technologies. And so, there are significant risks there in terms of social and ecological impacts. And then there's equipment manufacturing, of course, project planning and site selection, which involves, looking at land. And so there's a lot of issues surrounding there as well, given that these technologies require hectares and hectares of land. Of course, installation and assembly, operation and maintenance, transmission and distribution, and finally, the end-of-life disposal of the technology. So RE companies, the responsibility to rights and your own technologies, of course, this responsibility extends until the end of the life of the projects. And this case is, across all the technologies we're seeing. That's solar, floating solar, onshore wind, offshore wind, energy storage systems, and small and mini hydro. And we highlight all of this in our report. While more in-depth content accompanies each life cycle graphic, such as this one, the overall report is designed to serve as a snapshot of a rapidly evolving context. It does not purport to have all the answers. Instead, its key aim is to establish a compelling case for RE developers, investors, financiers, buyers, policymakers, and civil society to join us in diving deeper with the help of your respective expertise and lived experience within the value chain. Drawing on expertise from actors from across the value chain is essential in overcoming our respective blind spots and to comprehensively map the systemic barriers and opportunities for unlocking the RE sector's full and unique potential. By this, I mean the sector's potential in driving a truly just transition that enhances environmental and social resilience, a transition that restores and replenishes ecosystems while creating value fairly, and perhaps most important, a transition that leaves no one behind. With this in mind, let me now turn to some high-level findings in relation to impacts. To be clear, there are a host of positive impacts associated with the RE sector. We love having the RE sector. At the same time, there are clear impacts that the RE sector will need to account for and manage in order to holistically deliver positive impact. And some of the ecological risks relate to, as I mentioned, mineral use for equipment manufacture. Growing demand increases growing demand for minerals. Land used for siting large-scale projects, along with growing concerns about land availability and its impact on biodiversity. Our honorable senator already mentioned, there are implications with indigenous peoples in FPIC, getting their consent with the use of their ancestral domains, ancestral land. So that's a huge issue that we should be looking into, as well as escalating volume of waste from decommissioned solar panels and wind turbines. In terms of social risks, key issues that we are seeing emerge relate to labor and human rights, particularly in locations where raw material extraction is taking place, as well as where manufacturing for certain technologies is currently concentrated. Impacts on livelihoods of marginalized communities and the rights of indigenous peoples, as already mentioned. And across the spectrum, we are observing a shortage of transparency and accountability in the wider supply chain. It's very helpful for the civil society to have a clear view of the businesses of renewable energy companies. In the interest of time, and across the spectrum, we are observing, yes, of course, transparency. And let me jump straight into the ecological and social vulnerabilities resulting from land use changes. So this is one of the highlights of our report. As I mentioned, as RE scales in the Philippines, competition for land will intensify, particularly with regards to agriculture. Related concerns over the reclassification of land in the Philippines have been attributed to mechanisms and conditions of land acquisition. Existing processes have been associated with land-based conflicts, as well as the marginalization of rural land users. Conscious of these emerging tensions, a recent study commissioned by the DOE signaled the need for new policy responses to address food security implications associated with the growing number of solar and wind farms competing for agricultural land. Our research in relation to floating solar, however, indicate that similar challenges extend to floating solar. While floating solar has the advantage of circumventing land acquisition issues associated with traditional solar installations, the example of Laguna Lake, where scores of livelihoods depend on fishing and agriculture, foregrounds the likelihood of similar competition for limited resources. Fortunately, there are many constructive ways of addressing these competing needs, beginning with examples of agrivoltaic practices already being driven by some leading developers in the Philippines. Similarly, solar aquaculture, which combines the production of RE with the production of food to create environmentally friendly solutions to raising and farming fish, constitutes further example of this way forward. The invitation, therefore, is to rethink how land banks and other resources might be optimized to meet competing needs and thus yield mutually beneficial outcomes, particularly for the most vulnerable. In considering who the most vulnerable may be, it is important to carefully consider gender-related risks in the production of RE. For instance, in many rural contexts, women are responsible for growing food for their family and income. Consequently, large-scale land acquisition risks endangering women's livelihoods and food security unless processes explicitly recognize their needs. Women's voices are lacking in consultations on siting decisions. Failure to adequately consult them would only further entrench the discrimination women face. Similar degrees of gender blindness must be addressed with regards to compensation in event of displacement. Ultimately, the just energy transition is a critical opportunity for overcoming gendered power structures. From an environmental standpoint, the RE sector's potential threats to biodiversity and wildlife are multifaceted, both in terms of direct and indirect impacts. For instance, conversion of vast tracts of land for the installation of solar and wind power has affected the migration patterns of local birds in the Philippines and wider Southeast Asia. Similarly, in other RE technologies such as small hydro, impacts of individual small reservoirs and weirs will usually be limited, yet may have substantial impacts on river ecosystems when considered collectively. Deforestation during project siting, which displaces local wildlife, also impacts ecosystems and biodiversity, and many stakeholders do not appreciate the difficulties of properly restoring biodiversity akin to the relevant ecosystem. In this connection, unless biodiversity objectives are explicit and integrated into reforestation and broader restoration goals, restoration plans may prove to be inadequate in revitalizing functional ecosystems upon which traditional livelihoods depend. In turn, the cumulative impacts that are likely to ensue are at risk, contributing to the passing of critical ecosystem thresholds, particularly as the expansion of RE projects continues. What's perhaps most worrying is that the passing of such thresholds in many instances may not be immediately obvious due to system lags. The good news is that we already have evidence of good practice that lends itself to striking this balance well, by not only minimizing damage to biodiversity, but designing projects with a view to enhancing it. This may ultimately extend to partnering with indigenous communities as custodians of related ecosystem services, with the support of nature-based solution financing models to compensate them accordingly. The key purpose of the Responsible Energy Initiative is to help foster collaboration across the value chain to create the enabling conditions for such practices to be amplified in a first instance and later mainstreamed. On the last point, on circularity. Before passing the floor to my colleague Cynthia, I must highlight that our report also emphasizes the need to manage end-of-life disposal risks and to explore circular economy innovations in order to reduce dependence on finite resources and avoid the leaching of hazardous materials into landfills. Furthermore, the lack of reusability or recycling designs for RE will lead to large volumes of waste reaching the disposal stage in the near future, compounding the challenge. To date, however, end-of-life disposal processes for RE sector are largely overlooked in the Philippines. Managing these end-of-life disposal risks and exploring circular economy innovations is essential to reduce dependence on finite resources and ensure an ecologically safe and socially just transition to RE in the Philippines. that ends my part of the presentation. Thank you.
Now, in building on what Pachoy's just outlined, what's emerging is that the degree of complexity of managing RE-related impacts as the sector scales will require a three-pronged governance approach involving not only public governance, but also corporate and civil society governance. So in the sphere of public governance, the Renewable Energy Act anchors the clean energy transition in the Philippines. It not only requires projects to comply with environmental and social standards set by a whole host of government agencies, but also provides civil liability for environmental damages caused by RE projects. The DOE and the Environmental Management Bureau are required to conduct regular monitoring and inspections to ensure compliance with these regulations. However, limited resources are said to restrict their capacity to do so extensively. And similar challenges apply to local government units who have jurisdiction over project sites in their localities. As the energy transition accelerates in the Philippines, it's becoming increasingly evident that further regulatory measures will be needed to manage impacts. There may also be a need to undertake a systemic assessment of how various laws and regulations complement each other rather than potentially conflict, so as to avoid scenarios where there are unintended outcomes against protecting ecological and social impacts. Now, in terms of corporate governance mechanisms, the Philippines finance industry has yet to fully incorporate ESG and sustainability considerations into its businesses. Perhaps relatedly, interviews with various RE market actors indicated limited awareness of the full extent of environmental and social risks associated with the development of the sector, or the need to consider them. More to the point, given that RE projects are considered high risk and requiring large amounts of funding over long periods of time, considerations of long tail risks associated with the RE sector appear to be less of a priority for the time being. As for multilateral banks, safeguards, some local developers have explicitly aligned themselves with IFC performance standards in their environmental and social policy statements. However, beyond projects directly financed by DFIs, the application of IFC performance standards by financial intermediaries such as banks lacks a standardized approach. As for domestic banks, none are yet currently signatories to the Equator Principles. However, their application of ESG conditionalities to RE projects are beginning to take root, and with notable increase in large loans to the sector, so this gives an opportunity to further support this trajectory. As for ESG reporting, while there's been an upward trend in the adoption of sustainability disclosures by publicly listed companies in the Philippines, most local large energy incumbents diversifying their portfolios through RE subsidiaries currently do not highlight any RE-specific environmental and social impacts in their publicly available reports. Encouragingly, though, interviews surfaced that while reporting requirements do not extend to non-listed companies or projects, certain listed companies did ensure that their subsidiaries followed suit. As for developers, there are a diverse range of strategies that are being used to address their impacts, which underscores the nuanced nature of their governance structures and also reveals a varying degree of mindsets in relation to ESG. At one end of the spectrum, we have a significant number of RE developers who are managing their CSR initiatives through foundations or entities that are independent from their core business practices. And an underlying mindset that is driving a lot of this approach stems from the perception that RE is inherently clean and therefore warrants a lesser degree of scrutiny. And then a number of developers go further in managing impacts, with ISO-certified environmental management systems being the most predominantly used. A few of these are equipped with integrated governance systems that enable real-time monitoring and feedback from external stakeholders. Meanwhile, the most advanced developers have adopted policies around human rights, indigenous peoples, and have a dedicated sustainability committee at the board level. Notably, throughout the project lifecycle, these firms tend to prioritize employment opportunities for local residents and indigenous peoples. Some actively support the formation and accreditation of indigenous people organizations within their host communities and adopt policies to explicitly respect their land rights within their own operations. And they look beyond their immediate value chains to consider trade-offs. For example, addressing food security concerns due to loss of agricultural land, co-siting, for example, solar parks and wind farms with grazing practices or other community needs. Across the spectrum, however, one area requiring further attention is the creation of robust grievance mechanisms that are consistent with the UN guiding principles on human rights, and that are designed to enable trust for the rights holders, as well as providing adequate assistance for those who may face particular barriers to access. As for industry associations, to date, these bodies have been actively engaged with regulators to challenge issues relating to feed-in tariffs, net metering, and other schemes. But as the RE sector expands, there's an opportunity for them to further broaden their scope to support ecologically safe and socially just outcomes. Moving swiftly along, corporate procurement of RE is a growing trend in the Philippines. Various initiatives, such as the GEOP and REPH 100, are actively encouraging and supporting the uptake. Going forward, as part of these efforts, there's an opportunity for these initiatives to serve as levers for embedding responsible business practices. And last but not least, civic governance mechanisms have an important role to play in ensuring the accountability of the RE sector as it scales. For instance, knowing that the energy transition will catalyze considerable increase in demand for transition minerals, CSOs have been calling for the adoption of Alternative Minerals Management Bill. Their emphasis on participatory forms of decision-making is a critical step forward in building a responsive and resilient RE system. What the sum of these actors indicate is that there's a need, there are really encouraging signals to build on, but also the need and opportunity to do so much more. So with that in mind, whether the transition realizes its full potential in delivering ecologically safe and socially just energy system, it depends on all actors from across the system recognizing the systemic nature of the challenges at hand, and thus the importance of collaborating across silos. It's in bringing together stakeholders who do not traditionally sit at the same table that we will increase the prospect of identifying our respective blind spots and thereby unlocking that potential for the RE sector to drive a transition that is fast, that is fair, and that is just. So if you're curious about how to become involved, please join us after the short break at 11, because we'll be providing a lot more detail on how, where, with who we go forward in the coming year. And this is in the spirit of first recognizing, as I said, the systemic nature of the challenges, but the year ahead, what it will do is help us identify practical ways to transform business models and practices through a facilitated process designed to support innovation and tangible market solutions. So this is not pie in the sky. This is real. This is now. And the window of opportunity is now, given the climate crisis. Later, in phase 3 of the program, what we'll be doing is running pilot interventions based on the intervention areas that we identify over the coming year, and in order to demonstrate the art of the possible. So please join us in this call to action. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Cynthia and Pachoy, for the comprehensive overview of our report. I would like to invite the group to access the report by scanning the QR code flashed on the screen. You may also go to the websites and social media accounts of various consortium organizations from REI to be able to access the report. All right. At the heart of the Responsible Energy Initiative is really being able to bring together diverse multi-sectoral perspectives and to also define opportunities on shaping an ecologically safe and socially just renewable energy transition. We now move on to our moderated panel session. Moderating this discussion is Sumi, Managing Director of Southeast Asia Forum for the Future. May I please invite our moderator, Sumi, on stage. Joining this panel is an esteemed set of speakers. Our first panel speaker, Errol, is the founder and president of One Renewable Energy Enterprise. He concurrently serves as the president of the Renewable Energy Association of the Philippines. Errol brings with him over 30 years of supply chain experience and 20 years of renewable energy experience. He was previously the operations manager of Shell Solar Philippines Corporation. Let's give Errol a round of applause. Our second panel speaker, Anne, assumes the role of Philippine Country Manager at Global Wind Energy Council, or GWEC. Her leadership at GWEC is instrumental in directing policy and market work streams, critically shaping the nation's wind energy sector. With her 17-year track record in the Philippine power industry, Anne has been at the forefront of developing and overseeing renewable energy projects for both public and private entities. May I please invite Anne to the stage? Can we give Anne a round of applause, please? Our third panelist, Marla, drives the execution of BDO's sustainability strategies. She provides oversight on sustainable finance transition, compliance, policy formulations and programs implementation, and ESG advisory across the BDO group. Marla is an experienced international speaker on sustainability, gender, and diversity and inclusion. Let's give Marla a round of applause, please. Finally, Erica, or X, is the executive director of Oxfam Pilipinas. She has almost 3 decades of experience working in the development sector. For 22 years, X became the portfolio manager for a range of sectors, including scholarships, rural development, infrastructure, disaster risk reduction, and governance. Let's give X a round of applause. Over to you now, Sumi.
Well, good morning, everyone. Since we are here to speak about renewable energy, if you need to take a moment to renew your own energy with a shoulder shrug or a bit of a stretch, let me invite you to do so before we go into this very exciting panel to follow. So my physio says I need to do shoulder rolls, so I'm going to do shoulder rolls. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I'm very, very pleased and excited that so many of you have joined us this morning for this session. I hope that you are feeling inspired and enthusiastic about coming on this journey with the rest of our consortium, with the Responsible Energy Initiative Philippines. It really is. I'm a Southeast Asian, I'm a Malaysian, and I feel extremely proud that we launched it in India, and the second country in Asia to take on this challenge is in our home region. So personal pride in that. And I feel very close to the Philippines, having done work here on access to medicines in the past. A long while ago, the grey hair gives that away with my former home team, Oxfam. So it's a pleasure to be back here. This is a highly curated panel. As Marlon pointed out, the heart of the Responsible Energy Initiative is to bring together all the actors in the value chain to work together. And I'm going to emphasize that we really do need to, Marie from Tara whispered to me as Cynthia and Pachoy were presenting, my goodness, this is complex. It really is. And I'm sure all of you that are in, whether you're a developer or a bank or a manufacturer or procurer, will be really sensing the complexity of this. At the same time, recognizing that you are really our future. If you're in RE, you are our future. This is urgent. We need to act fast, but we can actually act fast and fair. It does not have to be, let's act fast first and then look at fairness after, because actually we may give up the opportunity to look at fair if we only focus on the fast now. It's curated, therefore, to have civil society, the banking sector, as you all know, that currently the banks are the ones that are providing the most financing to the RE sector. So Marla, very happy that you are here, you too, Oxfam having really taken the beacon in terms of focusing on the absolute importance of a just energy transition. We have Anne from GWEC. WIN is like this, right? Even the sound is like that, right? In the Philippines. So, and you were indicating when we spoke that these challenges are out there, but you also know the opportunity to address them is absolutely there too. And last but not least, Errol, solar, the light disinfects everything, and we need to bring more of that light into this country to address, some of the really fundamental issues, Honorable Senator, you mentioned, right? Energy security is absolutely key. Without energy, what do we do? We've become dependent on it. And when we can bring that energy from light, that is important. It's also curated because you'll notice something about this panel and our keynote speaker. We don't need to say any more. But Errol, you are in good company, good female company. All right. So let me start, first of all, with you, my friend X. You heard Cynthia and Pochoy speak about these impacts. And with the short time that they had, we were only able to surface some of them. But Oxfam has been doing so much work in this sector. What resonated for you, X, as you read the report and heard the presentation?
Thanks to me. I think first is it was readable, right? It's not your usual sort of technical jargonic reports, particularly around something as technical as renewable energies or just energy transition. I think it articulates the challenges and the pathways and the opportunities and the very reason why we're all here together, right? It's quite coherent. It has, a sense of structure that we can really draw on, especially for Oxfam Pilipinas, where just energy transition and climate justice is very important for us. But we also acknowledge we're still nascent in the game, right? But the challenges that we face, but then the opportunities that it offers, especially for poorer communities, and that's why we're here now, and we think that is a very important sector for Oxfam Pilipinas to work in. The other thing is, it's quite important to us because as a humanitarian organization, we have seen our work double, right, in terms of response. I have yet, last year, we had to address or give response for a volcanic eruption, for a typhoon, for a flooding, and an earthquake all at the same time. And so the climate change impacts are real, and they do adversely affect and disproportionately affect poorer households whose ability to cope is really lower than those who are, have access to resources. So I do hope that, everyone has a read of the report and assist us in the dissemination of the report. As far as Oxfam Pilipinas is concerned, we're bringing the challenges, the points, the issues, the risks, not just at the community level. We're proud to say that we're also engaging at the national level, and we also launched a regional, composed of Indonesia, Vietnam, Laos. So we're actually going regional, and we're trying to influence how ASEAN also addresses just energy transition and climate justice. So this report comes in so handy for our campaigns. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica. And the regional component is very important, right? Because unless we act as a region, it's quite hard for one country to take on. I mean, the sky is, we share the sky. Erica, may I just come back to you for a small follow-up? of the impacts that are mentioned, both the environmental and the social, as Pacho and Cynthia both say, this is a baseline report. Are there particular impacts that you feel that at the moment there may be a blind spot that you wish that we would look at better amongst the RE community?
Yes, I think the presenters and also the report also did mention and acknowledge, right, the gender blindness of just energy transition. For instance, yes, we say that women who have farms or agricultural lands might be at the risk because agricultural farms may be converted to RE. But at the end of the day, if you look at gender assessments, women are actually invisible in agriculture. And so they actually do not have as much access or equal access as men are, or men farmers, to government programs, because government or programs assume that it's the male who actually, do the farming. So I think when we say gender blindness, it's just not, we consult with women, but really understand the effects of climate change and the effects and impacts of any just energy transition action. For instance, in Nepal, right? They're more vulnerable because they're using stoves that actually are more harmful to women, and they're the ones doing care and climate, for instance, or care and just energy transition. Who does the housework? Who does who gets water? Who uses the most energy in a household? Finally, electricity. If you don't have power or electricity in households, what does that mean for women and girls? Security, protection, the vulnerability to harassment, to rape, because it's not well, or a community is not well lighted. So we say we acknowledge that it's gender blind, but I think we also need to really look into the specificities and the nuanced impacts and needs of just energy transition to women and girls and to other stakeholders as well.
Thank you very much, X. Let's keep that point in mind. Errol, may I please turn to you, because I did see you nodding quite voraciously when Erica was talking about agriculture, and I know when we spoke, it was something that you really had at the front of your mind. But perhaps we can go to you speaking about that in a minute. Your broad reflections on what you heard or what you read from this baseline report. What really stood out for you in terms of either the impacts that are current in the RE sector or are anticipated, or how they're currently being managed? What really, stuck in your mind or felt real to you from a sector specific perspective?
Yeah, good morning again. I just want to make a comment here. I noticed that I'm surrounded by empowered women. Oh, yes. Yeah, so I'm the only boy in the table. Okay, so anyway, when I read the report, I said, how would you translate this to common people? Because we're talking a lot of these words here, we can simplify it. But are they aware of such things? No, so I've been in this development for 20 years already. I've been to rural areas, walked the land, swam the ocean, if you call it that way. And when you reach those places, they don't understand this. So us here are talking a lot of this, but it doesn't translate down there. Not until they were affected by typhoons, they don't have power, and that's the only time that they come to understand these kind of things. So when I read that report, I said, how can we simplify it and educate the very people that we're trying to protect or serve, to put it that way? Because all of us here in this forum understand the whole thing. As you have said, Ms. Erica, it's simple, it's very easy to read. But I guess we should, the word that you use is dissemination. What is the mechanism that we can disseminate this to the very people that are on the forefront of this, effect of this? So I think the word that was used by the good senator this morning is responsible energy. That's really strikes me a lot. I've been doing a lot of off-grid development. And for me, that's the way to educate people. Do something, and we call it PURE. That's the acronym. Productive use of renewable energy. So do something about that area so that they would understand that this kind of technology benefit them. That's how I would probably do it. Act on it. Now, that's the way to disseminate it, act on it. Because if you don't, these are just talks. So we really have to walk the ground in order to reach these people and disseminate the concept that we're talking here. Okay, so I know that the focus the focus here is utility scale. And I said, my comment is, the more we focus on utility scale and the impact of the utility scale, the greater the divide between the haves and have-nots. It should be a big and small approach. It should be aggregated. When we talk about this, we should be talking also, what are the things that we need to do for the smaller ones? I know banks are banks. I understand that. Investors are looking at returns. Yeah, they're looking for something big. But the bigger it is, the greater the impact, we're creating even that social injustice because we're only catering to this. How about the islands? In the Philippines, we still have about 2,000 plus islands that doesn't have access or limited access to energy. What are we doing about that? If I do the inventory of the 2,000, probably there's less than 100 that has been fully electrified. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Errol. And we did speak about this, and it is something that has come up time and again as we were doing interviews for this report. How the challenge there is, how do you really create a responsible hybrid energy system in the Philippines? But I think the call to the utility scale is how much, what's the responsibility to create that space? But also, utility scale is big. You have the resources to be able to really chart the course for how do you pay attention to your environmental and social impacts, for a smaller scale to be able to follow. So there is that responsibility. Errol, when we spoke, there was something that you mentioned that I think is really pertinent to bring to the room today, which is around land. And it's something that Pochoy mentioned, land and land use, because we take vast tracts, in fact, more land than fossil fuel for RE. So where is the opportunity to really use that land in a way that respects the fact that it is a public good, particularly for farmers, where there's lesser protections when land is taken away? What have you been thinking about? I'd like you to share that with the room.
Yeah, when you develop solar farms or wind farms, like the landowners themselves, you just buy the land from them, you lease the land from them. What happens to those people who till the land before? You have displaced them somehow. I think the word that's being used this morning is agrivoltaic. Agrivoltaic is not a very cheap system. It's not cheap. But I think if I would say so, I would make agriculture sexy. I'll be using that. You allocate certain portion of the land, percentage of the land that you use, and make it into agrivoltaic or hydroponics. You know that the average age of our farmers right now is, I think everybody knows this, is beyond 60 years old, right? And more, 70. So most of that are males, right? But if you have hydroponics, you can make women do agriculture. Limited land. They can even have their nails painted because you're, under the roof. So that's why I'm making agriculture sexy. Encouraged because, rightfully said, it's the women who provides the food on the table. Yeah. What if you provide them that facility that for every hectareage that you cover, you have a certain hectareage that are dedicated for such endeavor?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Well, there's so much more to that, and that really is an innovation space. It's one of the things that we would be doing in REI Philippines, is looking for those opportunities to innovate and to do that as a collective. Conscious of time. Anne, I wish I had all day to speak to you all. But Anne, when we spoke, so Anne, you represent the Global Wind Energy Council here, and when we spoke, you talked about the fact that wind really is scaling fast, but we are at very early stages, and there is that opportunity then to correct at early stages. Where are you seeing, Anne, some of the well, first of all, please share your reflections, but particularly, where are you currently already spotting as an industry association possible structural barriers to be able to address some of these environmental and social impacts?
All right, thank you for that. I have a list here, so I might go through them. But first, the just energy transition, this is something shared by all the stakeholders. And when I say all, it's the government, it's the private sector, private developers, you have the NGOs, the financial institutions, include to that list your consultants, include to that list the industry association. This should be my ending sort of note in this talk, but I will mention it first. We call for energy security. We believe that RE is essential. We have no choice. We have to transition. We also believe that offshore wind or wind, just because of its huge potential, has the capacity to fast track and enable the RE ambition. We're looking at 35% by 2030, 50% RE share by 2040, and that's huge. We're coming from 22% this year, and we want 50% by 2040. And we believe that offshore wind, although again it's in its nascent stage, would highly contribute to that, adding industry growth, job security. But when we do that, we also call for a just transition. We echo the call of, no one should be left behind. So there's an understanding that the whole ecosystem would have to collaborate to ensure that no sector should be left behind. And I wanted to go through all of these stakeholders because it's important to also understand where we are right now and if there's an understanding common to all the stakeholders. So I start here with definitely the government. For offshore wind, DOE is critical, DNR is critical, BIFAR is critical, Marina is critical. All of these government agencies, and when we take a look at the EO21, we have identified more than 28 government agencies that would have to collaborate to ensure that constraints, to ensure that permit consenting processes are put in place. The DOE, also supported by the ETP, they're working on the marine spatial planning already. And that puts in, as I said, the constraints coming from the government agencies, identifying the priority use for the seas. Because we're putting our turbines not on land, but on our seas. And we have to identify who would be impacted by doing this, right? We're now talking about the fisher folks. We're now talking about the vessels that utilize our seas. We're now talking about the roros that are also utilizing our seas. And that doesn't impact just the fisher folks association, but also possibly tourism. And those are all considered, fortunately, in the way we structure our MSP and also the permitting framework specific for the offshore wind sector. And then I also wanted to highlight the developers themselves, and that would also include the industry associations such as the Global Wind Energy Council. We are very much cognizant of these impacts. And even without, sans the finalized permitting framework, the developers, most of them, no, all of them, have looked into how they would mitigate the risks, social and environmental. We look to DNR, the current process to obtain ECC, but there's an understanding that we have to go beyond what we have in place right now. When we talk about offshore wind, we talk about the birds. We don't talk about that in solar, not even in biomass, not even in hydro, right? But in wind, particularly offshore wind, the migration path, the bats, underwater noise, something we have to look into as well. We have to look into the migration pattern, the fishing grounds, spawning grounds. All of these additional impact assessment would have to be done. And fortunately, again, developers are starting to look into that, right? So they recognize that they have to do it. They have to start stakeholder engagement early on to identify these risks and, put up a plan to mitigate these risks. Sorry, I would have to go through because they're all important. I also want to highlight the project financing and the banks, the financial institutions, because they have, as a sector, consciously shifted to where the capital is going. And, the report highlighted that the due diligence process already include, I would think, the whole ESG considerations when they review projects for project financing. And that's good because then when RE developers come to banks, they would have to, at the very least, comply with the requirements coming from this sector. Also want to highlight the vital role of the consultants, because these consultants, environmental and technical consultants, we draw the experience and expertise from them on how they were able to mobilize RE in other jurisdictions successfully, and hopefully we apply those in the Philippines. And I wanted to also, because it's something that I've heard about in the COP28, ERM, a global consulting firm, produced a report on critical minerals. And it coincides with this report. Everybody's talking about energy security, but when we committed to tripling our RE commitments, triple energy, doubling down, tripling up, we have to look at where do we get, the minerals, critical mineral supply. So if we say that we're tripling up the supply for energy, then that means we also have the mining sector, the minerals, that would have to be tripled up again. And that puts pressure in an already, much pressured industry. And who's looking after that? And I guess the report highlights that, and it's important that as an ecosystem, we look at that as well. So I wanted to add that sector, the consulting sector, because they would provide that lens that we could all sort of learn from as well. Yes, correct, the benchmark. So I would end it with that, but I also wanted to highlight the importance of having this platform to amplify the call, the NGOs, even the funders, right, who actually put money for us to look into this critical issues, because as we move towards that RE ambition, other sectors might be left behind, and we don't want that. And in so far as the Philippines, if we can mobilize this much platform, that would definitely help the industry and even the infant technologies such as offshore wind and floating solar. That's long, but yeah, that's what I wanted to.
Thank you very much, Anne. I mean, it was comprehensive, and it really mapped out the whole value chain. It's something about there is no part of the value chain that we cannot look at, and there is something about the knowledge coming collectively across, and something about starting it now, right? I picked that up a lot. I'm going to beg a few minutes from the floor. We did start a little late, so I hope you don't mind, because we really do want to hear from the panel in full. Marla, I'm coming to you finally, and that is deliberate, because this doesn't work without capital, and capital has leverage. And BDO, given how embedded you are in the Philippines system, when we spoke, I'm very conscious that you have taken quite a number of steps forward and had the opportunity to lead the way. But tell us, what have you heard from the panel and the report that really kind of is at the forefront of your mind? What are you taking away that feels, yes, this is right? And where might there be any surprises for your kind of like yeah, we need to look at that more?
Thank you, Sumi. First of all, thank you for inviting me here, Maris. Thank you. I've known Maris since college at UP. So this is a good opportunity for me to share what BDO has done and has been doing and plan to do. Right. So as the largest bank in the country, when I looked at the executive summary, first of all, I saw a lot of alignment with what we are already doing and what we've done. I'm quite excited to read the full report actually and share it with the bank, because environmental and social risk assessment in renewable energies have always been part of what the bank has been doing. So first of all, I can talk about this all day, right? So I have seven points here, sorry, but they're all important, like Anne Margaret here. So first, let me just say that BDO really is committed to the development of more sustainable energy sources in the Philippines. We recognize that this is important for us to finance, and banks really play a key role in financing the just transition to a low carbon economy that is environmentally responsible and socially inclusive. So that's our mantra, so to speak. And to prove that, if you read our annual sustainability report, you would see that the bank has actually been financing renewable energy since 2010, right? So we do have this track record. Currently, we are financing 58 large-scale renewable energy, which is in geothermal, wind, hydro, biomass, solar, right? And the impacts of all of those REs are clearly shared in our sustainability report. So I invite everyone to have a look. And currently, we are the largest financier of REs in the country for a total installed capacity of 2,282 megawatts. Okay? And with more in the pipeline. So this has always been in our wheelhouse. It's not new to us. Second, in 2022, we issued our energy transition finance statement. And primarily, this is a commitment to supporting the Paris Agreement and the Philippines' nationally determined contribution. But specifically, our commitment is to bring down our exposure to coal-fired power plants by 50% by 2033. That's very conservative, I can tell you, because all of our financing for coal will end in 2033. So 100% is totally achievable, right? Or no more than 2% of our portfolio. And currently, coal in BDO's lending portfolio is at 4%. So imagine, we're just in 2024 now. So by 2033, it's all very achievable, right? So having said that, we are also committed to continuing our enhanced due diligence of all our projects. And I come to the next point, which is that we have always also looked at renewable energy's environmental and social risk. So REs do not get a pass. They go through the same rigor, the same due diligence that we do for any other project, particularly for projects from high carbon emitting sectors. Okay, and in our transition finance statement, we also committed to support our customers and the communities where our customers operate. So that is our version of not leaving everyone behind. We will support the whole ecosystem. So how do we do that? We can provide access to capital to our customers who are into coal and into high carbon emission sectors so that they can transition. So we are supporting them. We are not just eliminating them from our portfolio because it's easy to do that, you know. But what will happen? They will just go to another bank and you haven't really done any impact. You haven't really removed anything. You just removed it from your portfolio, which is not our intent. So our role is to shepherd them, help them transition. If they need access to capital so that they can access new emerging technologies and innovations to bring down their greenhouse gas emissions or to completely shift. Like, for example, we have clients who are into coal who are now wanting to shift to battery storage for solar panels. So that is something that the bank can support as part of transition finance. And we also committed to provide access to capital to individuals and communities who will be affected by the whole transition. So the whole ecosystem. Okay. And then next point is we have always had a social and environmental management policy which looks at E&S risk. Last year, we evolved that policy into a more comprehensive environmental and social risk management system, which was approved by our board. And the difference is, if our previous policy just covers lending. Now it covers all credit, all investments, underwriting, and operations of the bank. So it really cuts across everything that BDO does. And in that environmental and social risk management system, we identified 4 key focus areas. The first is climate change. The second is the environment. So we separated those two. And under the environment, we have a special focus on deforestation and nature and biodiversity loss. The third is human rights, because it encompasses all the rights, child labor practices, for example, modern slavery, community rights, IP rights. It all falls under human rights and covered by the bank's human rights policy. And the fourth focus area for ENS risk is disaster risk management and response. And why is that a focus area for us? Because as a bank, we have decided to be there at the aftermath of a disaster, because that's where we can use our funds. We can mobilize funds so that communities can rebuild. And not just rebuild, but rebuild better, so that the next time a similar occurrence would happen, seeing as how we are very vulnerable to climate change, then they already have mitigation and adaptation systems in place that we have financed. So those are our focus areas. I agree with Errol. There is really a need to raise greater awareness of all these impacts across the value chain, across the communities, across all the players that Anne Margaret also mentioned. And admittedly, even in our case, as a financial organization, that a bank that has been financing RE for over 13 years now, we are still learning about impacts that emerge as we go, because there are new technologies developing in RE all the time, right? And now we are studying offshore wind because the government has been very gung-ho on this. But what is the ENS impact of offshore wind? It sounds like, the best solution, but how does it impact the marine ecosystem? We have a blue bond that finances marine and ocean-related projects, water and wastewater management, and offshore wind. So when we assess projects under our blue bond issuance, the first in the Philippines and the first in Southeast Asia, then we have to look into those impacts as well. So we learn as we go. And actually, I would like to invite the team through Maris, because I have this regular session with our ESG trailblazers. These are the people who actually assess the ENS. And we have this ongoing capacity building. I think it's very important for them to know about the contents of the report, so that you can share with them and be part of their learning experience and have them apply it directly when they assess the projects. And finally, I think there should be a stronger focus really on the S, because any environmental impact eventually also impacts the S, right? So sometimes we look at the importance of impact to the environment, but really it's the people. And for BDO, we actually prioritize the S over the E most of the time, because social is more important. Last, so in terms of due diligence and governance oversight, we have impact assessment, monitoring, and reporting processes in place. I invite all of you to check the BDO website and have a look at our Blue Bond Impact Report. Have a look at our ASEAN Sustainability Bond Impact Report, because there we talk about both the environmental impact of the projects we finance under these bonds, as well as the social impact of all these projects. And we will continue to do this as we release more green, social, blue, orange/gender bonds under our sustainable finance framework. So the bank is doing a lot, basically. And I invite everyone, because we are transparent with the impacts that we have.
Thank you. Thank you, Marla. Thank you for sharing how progressive BDO has been in this area. I know when we spoke also, there's progressive and then it's a very dynamic and fast changing sector. So you're always going to have to go into it with your eyes continuing to be open and a degree of humility, right? That there are uncertainties that we need to address. I know we're a little bit short of time, but I don't want to leave without asking the panelists. And renewable energy is being touted as being efficient. So I'm going to ask you to be efficient. One sentence, if you had to make the case for action to the renewable energy sector to act in paying attention to its environmental and social impacts in a collective way, what would be your case for action in one sentence? And X, I start with you because you've had the most time to think about it. And the challenge is there, my friend. Yeah, just one sentence. And if you grab the mic, Marla.
Maybe 2 sentences.
Okay, I'll let you have that. Speak quickly.
I think, yes, we do need to accelerate, but we need to be inclusive. And we have to go from competing interests to win-win solutions.
Fantastic. Thank you. Marla, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
So I agree with what Erica said. I think we should be solutions-oriented and collaborative because the banks cannot do everything on its own. As Anne-Margaret said, it really has to be a whole of
system approach.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whole of system approach so that all our efforts together is more than, the impact is more than the sum of all our collective efforts.
Wonderful. So inclusive, whole of system approach. And
yeah, I repeat what I said earlier. It's not just about energy transition, but it's just energy transition. No one should be left behind.
So just and no one should be left behind. Thank you, Anne and Errol.
2 words.
Yeah.
Collaborative action.
Collaborative action. And you are wonderful because the next session we will have will be looking at what the collaborative action platform of the Responsible Energy Initiative will look like, and an invitation for you to join us after the session to hear about it if you want to be part of it. When you want to be part of it. Thank you ever so much. I know we were supposed to have an hour for this, so you've been wonderfully efficient in sharing your insights so graciously and generously. I look forward to working with you all over the next 2 years. And if you want to be able to have more of these very deep dive discussions on the issues towards tangible solutions and actions, join us. Thank you very much to all of you.
A big thank you to our moderator, Sumi, and our esteemed panelists for such an insightful discussion. Let's give Ariel, Anne, X, Marla, and Sumi another round of applause, please. Now, let's conclude our program with a video-recorded closing remarks from Mr. Kairos de la Cruz. Carlos is the Executive Director of the Institute for Climate and Sustainability, Sustainable Cities. Let's turn our attention to the screen as we hear the closing remarks from Kairos.
Good day, everyone. We're very grateful to be joined by our keynote speaker, Senator Risa Ontiveros. Our colleagues from the REI Philippines Consortium spoke earlier. Ms. Maris Cardenas, Ms. Cynthia Morel, and Mr. Pochoy Labog, our distinguished experts in today's panel discussion, and our guests from across the country's renewable energy sector and value chain. To everyone here today, thank you for spending your morning with us as we launch the Responsible Energy Initiative in the Philippines. Today marks not only the celebration of the International Day of Clean Energy, but also the realization of a collective effort that has evolved from a mere project for some of us into a comprehensive report and a collaboration platform for many more. We at the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities, alongside our colleagues from Oxfam Pilipinas, the Center for Empowerment, Innovation and Training on Renewable Energy, the Business Human Rights and Resource Center, the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung Philippines, and Forum for the Future are all immensely proud of these outputs. and more importantly, of the outcomes they promise. This report contains invaluable insights that have been formative to the Renewable Energy Initiative and what it aims to achieve. It was written across 2023 with inputs from research and interviews with contributors, all of which have shaped our analysis and case for action as presented today. The Philippines' renewable energy transition is best described in a single word: potential. Driven by our abundant, clean, and indigenous sources, the roadmap of our efforts for energy transition has long been underway. This is supported by the significant impacts we have seen of RE helping to ensure affordable, reliable, and secure energy for Filipinos. As a co-benefit, transitioning to renewables has also contributed to our decarbonization goals. There is almost no reason to argue against the scaling of RE, except that such a rapid transition inevitably comes at a cost. We have heard the report findings and some panel reflections today, from having the functional frameworks of ESG standards and impact assessments to upholding the fundamental principles of sustainability and social justice. More concretely, we can use these insights to outline action items for our respective sectors and understand the deeper motivations underlying them. Truly, this has been an exercise in driving home the message that a responsible energy system is one of collaboration, systems change, and the impact of the work we all do. I'm not alone in saying that it has been deeply rewarding for the consortium to realize the fruits of our labor from the past year and look forward to everything else thereafter. And we hope this launch positions us well for the next phase of REI Philippines. Cultivating an environmentally sound, socially just, and right-respecting future for renewable energy in the Philippines is not only a mission, but even more so a shared hope. As we embark on this journey, I am confident that the optimism and trust invested by each and every one of us in this initiative will not only match but surpass our expectations. We cannot achieve positive change alone. We need effective and meaningful partnerships to reach the optimal goal. To formally close, I invite all of you to join us and take part in this initiative. Let us pave the way for a sustainable and inclusive tomorrow where the energy landscape reflects our collective commitment to the planet, social equity, and dignity of all. Again, thank you for joining us this morning.